Okay, so Russian election hacking. Now, we're in a situation again where neither of us have any facts.
Right.
That is, I'm not on the inside. I have no connections with the NSA or CIA or anything.
Well, the 17 intelligence agencies, of which I can only name 3.
Yeah, it's like 17.
17? Who are these
Clapper
people?
is still clapping around in there somewhere, too.
He's in charge of the whole Schmeagle.
But there is something we could say, and that is that from the coverage that I have seen, it appears that, well, and in fact, there's another, the news just broke today, and I may make it the subject for week after next podcast, the first podcast of 2017, and that's a massive Russian organized ring was found doing fake advertising, generating, it's estimated, between $3 and $5 million per day in ad fraud. Anyway, the point is that in the sort of standing back from 10,000 feet, in general, I get the sense that Russia, for whatever reason, has been expending a great deal of effort on the cyber front. That is, in all things cyber, attacks, penetrations, scams of all kinds. We're often talking about .ru domains, and things are, generally terminating back in Russia. And so, and as I understand it, they don't have a super energetic economy. It's not producing, like a lot, except for, I guess, some natural resource-based stuff. So it's also something that is perfect for that kind of an economy. That is, cyber is, because it doesn't have a high entry cost. It scales well, and so forth. So I guess as I'm listening to all of this coverage surrounding, the did they, didn't they, what happened, what's this about, and also just all of the chomping at the bit that's going on. Everyone's just all in a big, flutter. It's like, okay, we've been saying now for years on this podcast that everything is porous. That is, we have so much complexity has been added, and we're lagging years behind in finding bugs that are often years old, and that creates a moving window of opportunity. All of that says that the more you want to do something, the more opportunities you can find. That is, everywhere we look, we see attack surfaces that can be leveraged. And apparently Podesta got his emails hacked by clicking on a phishing link, which, got something installed in his machine, and then they were able to say, "Oh, thank you very much," and look around. So stuff we've been talking about for years is happening, but also, there are, many of these organizations have subcontractors, which may or may not be very good. Some of the stories we heard were that the FBI was, for example, notifying a subcontractor who did IT for the Democratic National Party for months that their machines had been penetrated. And the IT guy didn't even take it seriously. He was part-time, and he didn't think it was the FBI. He thought it was just a prank call. And I mean, so it's a combination of human error, human factors, and of course, ultimately, software errors are the same thing. They're extensions of human mistakes that well-intended and intending programmers make, which doesn't keep the software from working, but it does create opportunities for bad guys to get in. And so I guess my take is, I'm not, without any evidence, without any insider knowledge, except if you just swept your arm across the last several years of this podcast, you would have to come to the conclusion that when somebody wants enough to get into something with the way things are today, as we wrap up 2016, it's possible from literally hook or crook. You can get in, and
especially a targeted attack, where a spear phishing attack, where they're going after a specific asset. That's very hard to defend against.
Correct. I would say it's beyond hard at this point. I would argue it's probably impossible. With everything we've seen, we keep seeing gifted hackers able to penetrate whatever they want. Pwn to own, every browser falls in the first hour. And it's like, ouch. And, and mobile phones do too. And
it's presumed that a government attacker has access to all, unlimited resources or virtually unlimited resources.
Yes. So if we imagine that Russia has decided by policy sometime in the past that the internet is the best thing that ever happened for enabling them as a society, as a nation state, to mess around with other countries, then you put compared to, for example, what the U.S. spends on military, you put relatively tiny cyber resources behind a concerted effort, and all of the evidence would suggest that they can pretty much do anything they want to if they try hard enough.
And it goes both ways. We're clear. I mean, why wouldn't we be doing exactly the same thing?
Right.
And there's a certain irony in it. It's the CIA saying, well, the Russians subverted our election after they have, that agency specifically has subverted elections with all sorts of covert actions over the last, 5 or 6 decades.
We were listening to Angela Merkel's phone.
Right.
She was a little annoyed.
That was the NSA. But the CIA guaranteed that we would win elections all over the world, and has for years. So you and I both are liberals and probably voted a little differently than the outcome. But I think it's a little overblown to blame Russia on the outcome of the election, or to say,
I didn't say that.
No, I know you didn't say that. That's what's being said. And I'm kind of want to push back a little bit on that, not because I'm happy about the result of the election particularly, but just because it doesn't seem like, getting into the DNC's email, if you said they got into the voting machines and changed the count, okay, but that doesn't seem to be what they're saying.
No. Well, and, relative to whether the election was altered, as we know, you can't prove a negative.
Right.
And so there's no way now, retrospectively.
Although we just saw today reports that said there doesn't seem to have been any widespread voter fraud at all.
Right. And I was thinking more in terms of biasing the electorate. On the other hand, you would argue that our own FBI was a substantial influence in that, with the timing of what Comey understood. I mean, I completely understood the position he was in.
That you could argue. Yeah,
he couldn't say nothing.
Yeah.
Or after the fact, he would have been blamed for not saying anything, and vice versa.
That you could argue about, but I don't. I think it's, in a way, it's a disservice to point at the election results, because what I would far prefer to hear our intelligence services saying is we have widespread evidence of Russian hacking in a variety of activities. We need to do something about that. When you tie it to the election results, it makes it much more of a partisan issue that really doesn't. It's a disservice to the much larger issue.
Well,
but I don't think they want to talk about how much we're doing. So I think they're reluctant to get into that larger issue, frankly.
Right. I think that's exactly true.
Yeah. I mean, I'm much worried, and we've talked about this before, worried about hacking the grid, for instance. It would be fairly trivial for a nation state to take our grid down. I mean, I'm a lot more worried about that.
Anyway. UPS, baby, battery backup.
Yeah. Well, I'm not worried about my servers anyway.
Yeah. So, okay. So, anyway, that's really all I wanted to say. I didn't want to not discuss it ever, but I just wanted to say, I'm sure it's no surprise to any of our listeners that this kind of thing is possible. We know, for example, that from Edward Snowden's revelations, how much our own government, our intelligence services are doing. It was an eye-opener. I mean, like all the project names. I mean, we had a field day for a year covering all of the disclosures that came out of that. And we also know that China is very active. We're very active. And we know in many other ways, Russia is very active. And it's not hard to be active. And there's also, people in their basements are able to hack things too. So yeah, what's interesting is that we're seeing as the internet intersects the real world, and I guess if nothing else, the outcome and the issue of the U.S. presidential election is about as real as it gets, then suddenly people are saying, oh, wait a minute. This is really bad. It's like, okay, this has been going on for a long time, and it doesn't seem to have gotten on anyone else's radar in as significant a way as it finally has. So I just think this is all for the good, because as we know, security is hard, and you have to work at it if you want it. And there are some places you really need it. I would argue messaging, I mean, some people certainly need secure messaging. I don't have any particular need for it because I'm just, arranging what time to meet friends for a meal. But still, so I guess my point is it's variable, and something like, the more important things are, the more people want them to be secure. The problem is we don't currently have an infrastructure that guarantees that. And there's, all the other lessons we see is that if we ever get there, it's going to take a while. And you and I, Leo, will have been long retired.
Yeah. I mean, let's get the intelligence agencies focused on what Russia is doing, and maybe come up with ways to defend against that. That I'm all for.
There's no way.
But I think you make an excellent point. I would hate to. Should we be fatalistic about that then?
I think you could. I mean, we could call it that, or we could call it realistic. I mean, look at the history. Yeah. The history says your light bulb could be attacking someone.
Right.
I mean, we're not making this up anymore.
Truthfully, if I were Russia, I think that there will be much more damaging things you could do than what seems fairly minor, which is breaking into the Democratic National Committee and releasing its email. It seems like they could have done a lot worse had they really been strongly motivated.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
And this is the other problem is there's always a problem with attribution. And we're also not able to read people's minds. So, like just recently, the question was, or what was in the news, was that Putin himself was directly involved. And, of course, no one will explain how they know that, but that's now what they're saying. Again, that stuff, I just sort of, I listen to it. I think, okay, well, that's interesting. Maybe that's true. But it isn't anything that is actionable. But what we do know is that everything has been built up in complexity on a fundamentally weak foundation. Lots of security intention, but complexity, as we've often said, is the enemy of security. And what's happened now is that the internet is becoming really important. And as we will be covering here in the next few stories, that, now our legislators, which is like the tool that the bureaucracies use for trying to, set limits and boundaries, that's now getting involved, which is always a little frightening.